thanks for everyone for attending today. I'm really excited to do this event. I love the idea of everyday creativity being celebrated, and I think that's something that content affords us, is the ability to make with the tools in our pockets. And then obviously I'm just such a fan of Heritage Crafts and everything that they've done to support kind of, you know, the amazing crafters and work that's been done in, you know, in the UK and beyond. So we'll go on to the first slide. There we go. So today's session is supposed to inspire you to consider how you can think about social media and content creation as a creative tool that you can use. I hope that I don't make you feel stressed or confused, because I think a lot of people feel that when they start trying to navigate the world of content creation. And I am aware that there will be people in the room who hardly post or have never posted anything in their life, and they're just curious about it. Or up to people who post every single day. So I'm going to try and tailor this to meet in the middle. And actually, in the chat, it'd be really cool if you could share either a 1, 2, or 3. 1 indicating that you're not really online. Maybe you post a bit, but it doesn't really matter. 2, if you post frequently, but still you're not like trying to grow. And then 3, if you're kind of an avidly online and you're kind of really active and so yeah, just to get a picture of who we have in the room. We must also remember that it takes, you know, as the saying goes, it takes 10,000 hours to make a professional, to become a professional at something. And this is really just your first hour on that journey. So if you feel like you're not going to go viral overnight or become an influencer in a week, then just take this as your first hour on that journey. So there's a lot that I'm going to try and cover in the session, and I'm going to focus mainly on Instagram, but it does translate to a lot of the other apps, because as I will contextualize, there's like a way of being in the world of social media at the moment. And then, yeah, if you have any questions as we go along, please put them in the chat, because at the end, we're going to have a session where Daniel and I will have a talk, and then we'll answer some of your questions. So yeah, and of course, please take any photos. I give you permission to take photos of anything that I share. And, you know, tag me online at Daisy Bow Craft if you do share it. But this is about community and creativity. So I hope some of you are going to meet, you know, other creatives tonight. Okay, so if we could move to the next slide. Just a little bit about me. Daniel gave a really great introduction, but I'm doing a PhD on content creation, where I'm trying to show academia that what we do has value, and that these small acts of creativity have impact. I also run a small business where I make and sell cyanotype kits and prints. As you can see, there's an example on the page. It's an old form of photography, but I'm also a content creator, and that's actually kind of come out of the PhD, because my PhD is practice-based, which means I do, and through making, I learn. And through that process, I've grown a following. And you could call me an influencer in some way, because I've been paid to make content for brands. So I've been paid to make content for Levi's, for Lucy and Yak, and for the National Trust. And then I've made content for Kew Gardens, Polaroid, and Moon Cup. And but I'd probably argue that a craft influencer is probably slightly different to what you'd consider as a traditional influencer in terms of the fashion bloggers and the sports kind of sports identities. But you know, we can go into that a bit later. So can you go to the next slide, please? All right, so generally when I speak to people about social media, they think of one of 3 things. They either think of influencers who narcissistically take photos of themselves and, you know, promote brands, or they think of children making silly videos with their phones, or social media is something that's kind of an add-on to like your work, whether it's somewhere that you work and they make you, you know, run the social media account without any training or support, or it's something that you feel like you have to do if you want to be present, and you know, with whatever your creative output is, you feel like you have to be online. And so a lot of people see it as quite stressful, because they feel like they need to market themselves. Can we go to the next page, please? So in light of that, actually, let's take a moment to think about all the reasons why we shouldn't be online, because I think this is really valid to address at the start of this conversation. And if anyone would like to feel safe to put anything in the chat, you could give me 1 reason why you shouldn't be online. I'm sure at least one of you will have something to say about being present online. Mental health, yep. So it's time consuming. If you put something out there that you put a lot of your creative energy into, and it doesn't get the kind of views that you're looking for, or the engagement, Yep, it takes up a lot of your time, both in watching content, but also in making content. So essentially, social media is a space where if we're basically working the land for free for the tech lords. So we're living in a techno-feudalist system where the land is owned by Apple, Google, Meta, Airbnb, you know, you can name it. All the tech giants have immense power over society where they own the land. So someone was saying at a conference last week that we own the means of production, we just don't own the land. And Meta, or basically Instagram, profit off of our free creative labor. So when we make beautiful things and we put it online, at the end of the day, that's going into the pockets of the tech lords. So it's like, you know, a harvest. You know, we work the land thinking we're going to make a profit, but really at the end of the day, Instagram is who profits. It takes your data. It's a space that can be perhaps not so safe for many people. So, and it can be quite ableist as well. Like if you find that the apps are kind of fiddly to navigate and so on. So I'm not saying that we need to ignore these aspects of content and social media. What I'm saying is that they exist and we need to acknowledge them. But I find that a lot of the time people get stuck in the negatives and they don't open themselves to moving beyond that and thinking about the way we can use it as a creative tool. So if we could move to the next slide. Social media has removed traditional gatekeepers in the form of the gallery, the broadcaster, the publisher, and you might even argue in some way formal education. Lots of people turn to online spaces to learn from each other. And there are ways that the interesting and very niche communities can form online, where if I have a very unique hobby and I make content about it, there's probably someone else out there that I can connect with across geographical borders. And so although the traditional gatekeepers have been removed, there are new ones in the form of big business and algorithms. So I can't afford to pay a team of 5 people to make delicious content and post every day, whereas Nike can, you know, big brands can. So that is a barrier to entry. And then another one is the fact that there's an algorithm, and a lot of people get stumped by the algorithm. So in the next slide, we're gonna talk a little bit about how social media, how it works in the current climate. We could swap. Great. So in the 1990s, we saw the introduction of the internet. And in its first iteration, it was basically a broadcast system. So if you think of a website, you go to a website, you consume, and then you leave. There's no conversation. And that is predominantly what the internet was. In the 2000s, we started to see the emergence of Web 2 or social media networks. And in this new system, it's not that I go to that website and I get information. It's all about a conversation. I have an account, you have an account, and we can engage with each other. David Gauntlett, who is this incredible writer, I'll talk a bit more about him later. He talks about it in the way that you think of a private garden and an allotment. So social media is the allotment format where we're all there together. And what makes it slightly different is the fact that I can share something of yours on my page, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or any of the other accounts, and all of my network can have access to you. And that's one of the key differences between the two systems, is the network. And what we're in now is what I'm calling Web3. A lot of people think of Web3 as Bitcoin, but in terms of the evolution of the web, from about the 2010 onwards, the social media platforms were governed by algorithms, and they've become incredibly smart. And from about 2020, with the introduction of TikTok and its very, very smart algorithm, we now live in a system where we no longer log on and expect to see people that we follow. We log on to these apps and expect to see content that's being curated for us by the algorithm, and it makes these decisions according to how we use the platforms. So I saw a figure that it's something like only 10% of people that follow you will probably see your content, which is quite scary when you think, oh, I have, 50 followers, and I hope that when I put something out there, everyone will see it. And although this can be quite limiting, and go to the next page, we can actually use it to our advantage if we can understand how it works. So in my research, I refer to them as the gods of the algorithm. And it's akin to if you were kind of plowing a field and you put the seeds in the ground and you tended the land all summer, and then all you hope for was for the rain and for the harvest. And, it's kind of up to the gods as to whether you're going to get that. And so what you would do is you'd give some kind of sacrifice. And in this kind of iteration, it's if you make beautiful content, it's a beautiful photo or video, you've got a great caption and you put it out there, it's not going to go anywhere if you don't do something that the machine wants you to do. And it's kind of ever changing, but once you start getting attuned to what the algorithms want, then it gets easier and easier to participate. So in terms of how the algorithms work, there's two ways that you can gain reach. The first one is platform design, and the second one is human behavior, if you look at the left box. In terms of platform design, you have to think, what does this beast want from me? What does Instagram want from me? Well, Instagram at the moment wants video content. It wants video content that's in a full screen mode, and it wants you to use audio. If you do any kind of Googling, that's kind of the stuff that comes up. But if that's what it wants, and if you don't give it that, then it's your content may not get the reach that you're looking for. So platform design. The second thing is human behavior. You are competing with a really incredibly busy attention economy. If your content isn't directed towards offering value to the people who are consuming it, then it's going to get lost. And there's a stat, which is that your content has to catch someone's attention within the first 3 seconds, which sounds awful, but actually I'll give you some techniques on how you can do that. So yeah, thinking about the platform and what it wants from you, and then thinking about making your content in a way that adds value to the people consuming it. And then in terms of how the algorithm works on the right-hand side, it processes content and it propagates it. And it processes the image, the text in the video and in the caption, and the sound. So every bit of your piece of content is being read by the machine. And if you have a flower in your video or in your photo and you post that, the machine can tell it's a flower and it will most likely take it to people who like flowers. And the reason they do this is because if we're making the free content for the machine, if it takes it to people who want to see it, then they stay longer on their app. And therefore it serves us and it serves the machine, but then also the person consuming is being brought things that they are there to kind of waste their time on. People log on to social media predominantly to procrastinate. They're waiting for the bus. They're trying to like de-stress from the day. And the ways that the algorithm propagate your content is which basically means what shows up when you search, what shows up as trending, like when you log on and the algorithm brings you something in the feed, and then adverts. And what I'm talking about today in mentioning adverts is all about free reach, organic content. In the world of social media marketing, it's usually 2 separate departments. There are people who know how to post stuff which they pay to get reach. And then there's the kind of organic side, which is what a lot of us will be dealing with, which is just posting and seeing what happens, and hoping that other people like what you put out there. So if we could go to the next slide. So some advice that I can take from what I've just told you about the algorithm that you could take is you have to think about how is your content inspiring, educating, entertaining, or engaging audiences. And this is the whole idea of offering value. So a lot of the time when people log on to social to share something, they're thinking of, oh, I have this thing and you want this thing and you should come and get it from me. And what you need to do is reverse your messaging. So for example, if I was going to make some content about this session tonight, it's a free event. It's a great event. I could go, come to this free event where we're going to talk about content creation. Immediately, it feels like something I'm asking. Whereas if I say, you believe, you want to learn how to make better content. There's a free workshop this evening and I'm offering it for free. So it's thinking about, it's the same message, but you're just changing the way you're delivering it. And that's, so in that sense, you're thinking about how am I engaging people? Like, can I inspire them to want to take part? I'm not selling them anything. I'm not trying to get them to do anything. I'm just offering value. And there's a rule here on the right that you can think about is 80%, 20% rule, which is 80% of your content should offer value and roughly 20% should be asking for something. Now, if you don't offer anything, any services, don't worry about this rule. You just keep on having fun. But if you were thinking about, oh, well, you know, I offer some kind of creative service, or I want people to follow me because I think I make great content, then if you're asking all the time, then people aren't going to want to engage with you. Whereas if you spend a lot of your time just, you know, creating and adding beauty in the world and making engaging content, then yeah, that ratio should be about 80-20. Another thing is that only about 20% of your content will generate 80% of your views. So if you post 10 things in a month, only 2 of those bits of content will probably reach the audience that you want them to reach. However, if it reaches the right audience and they come back to your profile and they see the other great stuff that you've created, then that's a win, because they're going to say they are offering something on this account that I can't get anywhere else. Right. There's a lot of information in this. Hopefully, you guys have all got some questions that we'll talk towards the end. You can ask towards the end. If you could go to the next slide. So I'm going to show you just a few seconds of 3 different content creators who offer value, and you can just notice how they don't start off with saying, you know, hello, my name is. They basically lure you in with something that's very visually appealing, or they're offering you some kind of educational advice. Notice how it's not one long shot when they're filming. It's kind of lots of different little shots or different angles to kind of keep you engaged. They all seem to start with a little bit of movement. So that's that kind of the first 3 seconds. You'll see there's like some kind of movement in the frame. Daniel, do you mind if you could just show like, I don't know, 10 to 15 seconds of all, one of the.
If you want to make a rug, you have 3 tool options. Your second choice is the Danella tool. It's a semi-automatic tool. The pros are it's about 3 times faster than a punch needle. However, it's much harder to find. I got mine from Etsy, and there's some on eBay, but they're usually sold out. To use it, you just push the filament through the top, grab your yarn and pull that through. Then you place the tool down onto the fabric and turn the crank, which is what pushes the yarn through to the other end, kind of like a sewing machine, except it makes loops rather than flat stitches.
This little cutie is a pair of buttonhole scissors. They are characterised by the gap between the pinch and the middle of their blades, which allow them to cut buttonholes into clothing without cutting across the hem. However, these don't work just yet. This pair marked Unity Sheffield, was made by the Sheffield Cutlery Cooperative, which ran for 100 years before closing their site at the intersection between Eyre Street and Matilda Street, which is now a car park. The company was run as a worker co-op, which meant the factory and brand was owned and run by the workers, with the surplus value in the form of profits split amongst them.
Right, yeah, so these are 3 heritage crafters who do some form of heritage craft. And it's just really interesting to look at what other people are creating and to think about the techniques that they're using. It can all feel kind of very fast-paced and advanced, but actually these are just tools that you can get very familiar with that are on your phone. Some of them use trending audio, which will be a factor that we'll think about later when we're thinking about making content. But as you can see, none of them sat there on a chair facing the camera going, hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'm going to talk to you about this. They immediately went into the offering value by bringing you in. So if we can move to the next slide. Thank you. So if we have to think about how content creation is a craft, I like to use the metaphor of a jumper. So anyone just can make content, just like anyone can knit a jumper, but not everyone wants to do it and not everyone can do it well. And it takes a lot of really bad jumpers before you can make something that not only you are proud of, but other people will think is good. And when you're making a jumper, you need tools, patterns, materials, and then a level of skill. Go to the next slide. And David Pye talks about how the quality of the result in terms of crafting is not predetermined, but it depends on the judgment, the dexterity and care with which the maker exercises as they work. The essential idea is that the quality of the result is continually at risk during the process of making. And that's one of the joys I get out of making content, is that I don't quite know what's going to work, but the more I play around with it and the more I use the tools, the more it gives me like an exciting result, and I can get better at perhaps achieving what I'm looking for. So if we can go to the next slide. In terms of tools, there's tools that are both hardware and then there's tools that are software. And you don't have to use any of these tools. You can use whatever works for you, but it's just getting people to think through how using tools can make the process much easier for you. So in terms of hardware, a smartphone that can capture footage, maybe a tripod to take footage while you're doing your thing. And then a lapel mic can be really useful, because I've heard somewhere once that someone will watch a video with bad sound over a video with bad image quality. I mean, people would rather watch a video with a bad image and good sound, sorry. So if the sound is crisp, you've got people hooked. And then in terms of software, tools like Canva, which you can use as a kind of graphic design tool, although be careful because it does have a very same look. You don't want to look too much like everyone else or look too perfect, but it is a great tool. CapCut, which I use, is a video editing tool. It's incredibly smart. It has a teleprompter option. It has a lot of really smart features. It's even got templates that you can, kind of like a paint by numbers where you input your images and so on, and it makes content for you. Snapseed is just one of the many photo editing apps that you can use. And then obviously all of the platforms, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, they'll all have inbuilt editing features. And actually, I'd probably argue that we are in the age of where they're fighting for our content. Whoever makes great content, that's where the followers will be. And so the easier that Instagram can make it for us to make content, the more we will make for them. And the same with TikTok and YouTube. And actually, that's a great position to be in for us if we're creatives that want to use these apps for whatever we're looking for to achieve with them. So the next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of patterns, no one just knits a jumper without looking at a pattern. You have to copy someone else's work. You have to understand how people have done it before you. So with social media, patterns are basically about being present online and looking at what the conversation is. Look what people are posting. So there's this great, you can see Jim Carrey here from that movie, The Truman Show, which is a movie where he doesn't know that he's in a documentary series where they film his whole life. And every now and again, his wife has to like sneak adverts into the show. And so he's confused. He's like, she's busy advertising some hot chocolates. She turns around and she talks about the hot chocolate. And he's like, what are you talking about? Who are you talking to? And a lot of the time people turn up online and they just post something and they leave. And it's got nothing to do with the context of the space. And in terms of patterns, you will see that there will be ways that people communicate their work. And if you're present online, what I would recommend is you go on for like 5 minutes, you look at what other people are doing, and you find a video that looks really good and you save it. You can see on the bottom, out of the 3 images on the bottom, I've circled where it says save. All you have to do is push 3 dots on whichever platform you're on, and you can save it, and you can actually save it into a folder. And I have a folder called inspiration. And that's where I go to if I've got some time and I'm thinking, oh, I'd like to post something today. And I can just look at some of the stuff that I've saved for later. And someone high up at Reddit once spoke about how you should think of social media as a dinner party. You don't just turn up and you lead the conversation and leave. You turn up, you listen to the conversation, you add your 2 cents, and then eventually you can start leading it. And this is the same thing with us. If you're starting to make content, don't feel like you have to be absolutely original immediately. You can like follow the patterns of behavior, copy other people's work, and then start making your own, drafting your own patterns essentially. And then just on the left here, on that left mobile screen, like I said, a lot of the platforms are offering templates for you to use. So in the section at the bottom on that mobile phone, you can see there's like little segments, like little numbers. Basically, all you have to do is add your photos and it will edit it into a full video for you, which I think is really fascinating, like a paint by numbers, but for content. So if you can go to the next slide, please. All right, so if you could just show, but before you click it, I was going to say, so there's, for example, for a pattern, occasionally you'll see a trend emerge online. And this is a trend which has the song, It's Been a Long, Long Time, as the kind of the back sound. And when you click the sound at the bottom of the video, it will show on the right-hand side, you can see lots of examples of people who've made content to that sound. And it's not all part of this trend. But if we could just maybe show one example after the other, Daniel, and we can have a chat about it. Aren't you afraid of the chemicals getting to you? No, not really. This one's, aren't paint fumes bad for you? No. So it's really silly. And it's like, this is like got nothing. I mean, this has like no value other than being entertaining. But what I get excited about when I see something like this start to emerge, and it happens kind of, there's like a moment where lots of people are doing the same thing, is that it's sound first, meme or inside joke second, and your interpretation third. So if you're scrolling online, the fourth or fifth time you come across a video like this, you're going to watch to see how have they interpreted this? How have they added their own flavor? What have they contributed to this trend? And that's like a fun way to think about the patterns of behavior online and how participating can be quite exciting because it just like generates, it's like a creative prompt. It's like a challenge that you can participate in. All right, next slide, please. Okay, then in terms of materials, you can't, if let's say that trend was something that you wanted to participate in, unless you have a video of you doing your creative act in that format, you don't have the right materials for the project. And you have to think of it in the same way as sewing or crocheting something or, making something out of ceramics. If you don't have the right materials, then you can't do the project. With fabric, is it the right size? Is it the right color? Is it the kind of got enough stretch to it? And it's the same with content. A few years ago, Instagram required that you post square photos. And so any content I have of any of my old crafting is in a square format. Whereas now the machine wants you to do full screen content. And so, if you're filming like this versus like this, this is how you would film if you were filming for social media today versus here. And this will shift and it will change. For example, TikTok is experimenting with photos at the moment, and nothing is really set in stone, but it's just something to consider is, do you have the right materials? A lot of the time, crafters won't have the right materials when they first start making content. But once you get into the habit of capturing your creative process as you go along, then you'll just have a stash ready to go. I have stuff I can just draw upon if I want to quickly do a project, just like any old crafter or creative person who has their little collection of tools. Okay, next slide, please. All right, in terms of skill, so skill is what's going to really help you. And the problem is that a lot of people are scared to post, or they post a little bit and then they don't get the results they're looking for and then they give up. But unfortunately, or fortunately, it's one of those things that you just have to do in order to get good at it. And you have to constantly review what you've put out there, maybe create content in response to what people are saying. I mean, the best thing is if people are engaging and giving you stuff to kind of create in reaction to. So there's certain things that I now know what to do. So for example, on the screen here, you can see, first of all, it's a full screen video. At the bottom, you can see the audio. There's a little upward arrow on the audio. I now know, and you'll now know if you log onto Instagram, any audio track that has an upward arrow basically is hot, and means if you use that audio, you're going to enter yourself into the slipstream of the algorithm, and your content has the potential to see thousands of people outside of your social network, your kind of follower list. I use a hook in the first 3 seconds. I have text on my screen, and then I use various techniques throughout the video. Another thing about skill is about using your analytics and constantly, don't have to constantly, I mean, I say that I don't generally review my work as much as possible as I could, but it is interesting that the apps do offer you insights to be able to look at what works. So for example, these screen grabs on the bottom right-hand side are from TikTok, and it tells me for this one video I made about heritage crafts, it tells me what top words were used in the comments: glass blowing, heritage crafts, critically endangered. And then on the right-hand side, it even told me where people liked my video. So at which point of the video people were kind of engaging with it, which is amazing. And like I say, these apps are going to make it easier and easier for us because it needs us to make this content to keep people on their platform. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so just briefly, I won't go into this into too much detail. I do make an argument in my research, which I will find out more about once I start my interviews. But I do believe that there's a phase to being a creative content creator, and it combines 2 phases of an amateur phase and a hustle phase. So I believe that people who create and then share online probably start off with making the thing and then thinking, oh, I'm going to share the thing on my social. So an amateur comes from the word for the love of it. So people just put stuff online because it's, for the love of it. There's no kind of agenda. But then they enter a phase where I call it a hustle phase, which is basically a really stressful phase where they're trying to upskill, they're posting all the time, they're doing a lot of research, they're putting a lot of effort into making great videos or great content for their profiles. And actually, this is a phase that a lot of people will probably drop out because there's so much anxiety connected to it. And they're not allowing themselves to be creative. Whereas if you get to a phase where you can kind of let go of the anxiety of getting reach but you've got the skills that you need in order to post, then you can bring that kind of amateur love back into the process, and you just post when you want to post, and you create because you feel inspired to create, and you see the whole process as a tool that you're using and it's not using you. And that's where I want people to think of themselves as content creators rather than content creators, because often people are just making to put stuff out there, but really, how can you find peace and joy within yourself to use the platform to connect with like-minded people and share your work? Because I believe I have two creative acts. I make the thing, I'm in the habit of capturing it, and then at a later date, I sit down, I look at what other people are posting, and I go, I want to put something out there, and then I make a video or whatever it is I'm making. Next slide, please. So just to kind of end off this little session, if you know, I generally want to like add a workshop element to these sessions, but I don't think there's enough time in what we've got today. So in terms of a process, try and get into the habit of capturing your process. When you're ready to make content, scroll for inspiration, see what people are talking about, if there's any gaps or if there's anything that makes you inspired. When you're editing, think of the story, think of movements, think of how you can keep it interesting in those first 3 seconds. Even if it's one long video where you are talking to camera, there are things you can do where you can cut the video so that you cut the ums and the ahs out, or you cut it and then one frame is slightly closer because you've zoomed in on it, and then the next frame is you're back there. And these are very easy techniques that you can use in CapCut or on Instagram or TikTok or any of the apps. Always add text and audio, as in music, natively from the app. TikTok and Instagram and YouTube all want to feel like they're the only app in your life. And if you do everything out of the app and then you upload it, especially if you put a TikTok video on Instagram and you've got the TikTok logo, Instagram's going to feel like it's sloppy seconds. So always use the audio and the text natively in the app, and that will help you with your reach. Don't forget to make a cover photo in the process, and then don't disappear after you post. Make sure you participate in the conversation, and remember that social media is social. At the bottom here, there's 2 resources that I find very valuable. There's a podcast called Social Minds by a company called Social Chain, and they interview sector leading content creators or people who make content for companies. And they give you they tell you about all the latest developments in social media. So if there's any new thing that you should be or could be using, they'll tell you about it. And then there's some great books by David Gottlieb called Making is Connecting and Creativity, which I think is just incredibly important if you want to think about how you can use social media to share your creative act. And then on the right here, if you want, I don't know if anyone wants to take a picture of the screen because we're coming towards the end of the session, or at least my talk. But these are just some tips and tricks that you can consider using as part of your process. So for example, utilizing filters like a green screen filter that you'll find on, let's say, Instagram. This is a filter where you click a button and then behind you, you can touch a photo so you can basically put a screen behind you. There's my cat. Anything that you do can be interesting and will make great content. Just because you think it's something that you do every day and people won't be interested in how I sharpen my pencils. Actually, that's very interesting, and you'll be surprised at how much value you have to offer the world. So don't think that you don't have enough to offer. And if you feel like you don't know what you're doing, get your nearest digital native to help you. Think about whether you have a creator account versus a business account. A business account is really for an actual big business, someone who has money to pay for advertising, or someone who's selling products through the Instagram app or any of the apps. So I definitely recommend changing your account to a creator account, and that will unlock certain audios and things for you because they want you to do well. Don't go too heavy on filters and transitions. It's like when you get given a box full of crayons and you want to use all the colors. Just kind of curate yourself a bit, that whole take one thing off before, what was that, Coco Chanel, take one thing off before you leave the house. I find people get very excited once they discovered all the apps you can use, and they want to throw it all in. Use the draft feature. You can draft content and just let it sit. So if you feel like you have a very creative day and you make a few videos, you can just leave it on your phone for a few days and post later. And remember to only post if you want to, and to do whatever you want to do. You can ignore absolutely everything I've told you today. The key here is that you're using it for yourself and for what you want to achieve. And there's definitely power in just being a lurker, because you're not giving any of your creative energy to any tech lords. You're saving it all for yourself and just, lurking in the community.